On this boat, adventurers have decided to investigate this reality. Their objective? To find out to which extent the White Continent is today a silent victim of humans. On board, notably, is Laurence de la Ferrière, the only woman to have done a solo crossing of Antarctica in its entirety.
I've been walking for 8 hours.
That was more than 20 years ago. By her side is Eric Loizeau. Route du Rhum, Transat's solo Atlantic record holder, this Breton sailor has faced many storms all over the world. Despite his track record, Antarctica is a first for him.
You have to be able to improvise. For one's quick improvisation, depending on how the wind turns. And especially there, the way the ice is moving. Because now we're in December, which is summer, so the ice is melting, etc. So the ice is drifting with the currents. It amasses in certain spots, so there are places we shouldn't go. And then we'll see how it goes, because this trip is a real adventure.
Drifting ice. Bottomless anchorages, strong and unpredictable winds. A voyage full of unknowns. But by the end of it, Eric and Laurence intend to come back with answers to their questions. What impact do humans have on this part of the planet? And above all, is Antarctica still a land of peace and science? In this adventure, Eric and Laurence have been joined by other enthusiasts and a scientist. Hélène Dubrasquet is a young French biologist who moved to Chile 5 years ago to research marine flora in Antarctica. Alain Blanc is a Swiss adventurer. He is there to test the solar-powered kayak from the Planet Solar Foundation. During their 6-week expedition, this catamaran, which is the pride of its owners, Maria and Alejandro, will be their floating base. This Argentinian couple has brought with them Duarte, Andre, and Rita. And there's Eugenio, who knows the Antarctic Peninsula well, having been a sailor in the Argentinian Navy. Before encountering their first icebergs, there is one passage they must cross, one of the most dreaded by sailors, Drake Passage, the gateway to the White Continent. 3 days of navigation, which can be intense. It's there where the Southern, Pacific, and Atlantic Oceans meet, where all these currents join together with no land to tame the powerful waves.
So here we're above the 50th parallel, which sailors used to call the Furious 50s, due to the sound of the wind and the roar of the ocean. But it's not the case today, thank goodness. The conditions are typical of southern oceans. A gray sea with a fairly low sky. In the good old days, we did all the navigation with a sextant. So with the sun and the moon and the stars. And it's true that it was complicated in the southern latitudes because actually we didn't have a lot of sun during the day. Typically today we've had 2 or 3 moments when we could tell our position by the sun.
And today, the computer's predictions do not bode well. During storms, Drake's fierce waves can reach up to 33 feet high. Eugenio is dreading them.
Bad weather takes here. It's not just in the middle of this passage. I prefer near the islands.
The conditions are average. Actually, a depression is going to cross our path. However, if we're fast enough, we can pass in front of the depression, and then we'll be fine. But that means we have to go quickly now. It's never an easy place, and conditions are rarely ideal throughout the passage. I always say that too many screens are overkill. That is, they make decision-making difficult. It's complicated when you have screens everywhere. The forecast that we had yesterday has changed in relation to what we have today, so in just 24 hours. There you have it. We need to take that into account too, and it's complicated to manage. It's for that reason that when we had nothing, it was a lot simpler, because we didn't have too many questions to ask as regards the evolution of the weather and how it was going to work out and all that. So let's see what we're going to do.
The conditions have been clement. Drake's Passage is now behind them. If after a 50-year career, Eric continues to travel the seas of the globe, it's no longer to race for trophies, but to wage war against one of the biggest enemies of nature, plastic. Ambassador for the Environmental Foundation, Race for Water, he takes samples during each of his expeditions.
So the goal of this manta net is to take a sample of seawater, which will then be sent to Dutch researchers for analysis in a laboratory to establish to which extent the sea is polluted in Drake's Passage. It's a place where very few surveys are done. Plastic pollution is huge. We can't imagine how bad it is. And it's not really what we see. It's not the plastic bags floating on the surface of the water. It's all a dissolution of plastic that make microplastic fragments which impact the plankton. And as we have become aware recently, it impacts all marine wildlife.
Samples that Eric will continue to collect for the duration of the expedition.
Okay.
There's no more net.
Oh, that's ridiculous. Good grief.
Do you have a second one?
No, I don't have another one. I think that with the pressure of the water, the thing is broken. And so as a consequence, we've lost the container. It's a bit worrying because that's something we can't replace.
As you'd expect from good sailors, Eric and André do the repairs with the materials they have on hand. A bit of DIY and imagination enables them to recreate the essentials with a container found on the boat.
I get the impression that our device has worked wonders thanks to our bit of DIY.
Hélène, the biologist, analyzes the contents of the net drag and identifies certain debris.
The problem is that you're not going to see it. It's blue. It's a little blue thing.
But with the naked eye, it's difficult to determine the exact nature of the debris. Each year, more than 8 million tons of plastic are dumped into our oceans. And Antarctica hasn't been spared. The circumpolar current, which flows around it, carries up to 150 million cubic meters of water per second, 150 times the flow of all the rivers in the world, thus draining en masse pollution coming from the other oceans. A threat whose tangible consequences for the biodiversity of one of the last marine sanctuaries is not yet known. Even thousands of miles away, humans are damaging the flora and fauna. Humans have always wanted to leave their mark on the entire surface of the Earth. And the White Continent has not been left out. The history is recent but substantial. 2 centuries of exploration, of conquests, and numerous epic tales that have become myths.
It's so easy to find. The light.
As is the case with this first land which has appeared on the horizon, Elephant Island, a name inseparable from that of the great British explorer Ernest Shackleton, whose crew found refuge there after their boat sank in 1915 after being trapped in the ice and crushed. After more than 2 years of drifting, the exhausted survivors reached the island with practically no resources. While waiting for the return of Shackleton, who had left to find help, the rest of the crew had to wait 4 months on the windswept coast, with just 2 canoes overturned on the frozen ground for protection. Despite the dangers and the suffering, they all returned alive.
It's such a mythical place, and I find coming here really moving, especially when I think about the lives of the people on this island, waiting to be rescued.
Sheer cliffs, hostile lands where no anchorage is sheltered. The conditions on this island are not very favorable to human life. From here, Antarctica seems unconquerable. And yet, heading south, the crew sets off to meet the people who have settled here. King George Island, named by the British Captain William Smith in honor of his monarch, King George III. The explorer discovered Antarctica in 1819. 200 years later, there are hundreds of men and women here from different backgrounds and nationalities. Among them, climatologists, meteorologists, biologists. These are the guardians of global warming. Approaching the coast, nature reveals itself to us in all its glory. A fragile beauty. In less than 30 years, the southern continent has lost 3,000 billion tons of ice, impacting sea level by nearly 1 centimeter and strongly influencing the salinity of ocean waters. And what will the future hold with temperatures rising 2 or 3 times faster in the polar regions than in the rest of the world? This is one of the questions haunting a large number of scientists, including those on this boat chartered by Homeward Bound, an organization promoting women in science. For more than 15 days, over 100 researchers observe, discuss, communicate.
By staying on the boat for 18 days, we're forging very strong links between several disciplines.
Do you have another location lined up for next year?
Every year they select 100 women from around the world to take to Antarctica, and we'll continue to be part of the program for the next 10 years, possibly longer.
So we're really here to observe climate change. It's a place which is natural, which might even be the last natural place in the world. And yet it's a place that is very heavily impacted by climate change.